Shalom, shalom. First, I want to start off by giving all honor, praises, and infinite glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Kakadash. I want to give double honors into the elders, apostles, and bishops, GMS, Great Millstone, who rule well, teach and edify, and peace and blessings to you, sincere Akim, Wa'akwat, in this household of faith. My name is Ishaya. I'm the young bro from the GMS Arizona Church, and I want to make an edifying video. Going into this place has a, fake compassion, People are fake compassion about one another in Babylon the Great, which is obvious. But going into the spirit of, rebuke, people in this world will, these wacky-tacky Christians will say, people living their life, I'm not going to tell them how to live their life. They can do whatever they want to do. And we know through the scriptures, those that are, consented with them, those that justify wicked, evildoers. Let me see if I can get that. Bear with me for 1 second, Salakia. Because you can't be a friend of this world, man. You can't be in agreement to these idiots. It says, he that, in Proverbs 17 and 15, it says, he that justified the wicked and he that condemneth the just, even they both are an abomination unto the Lord. So consenting into, you can, do whatever you want to do. That's a disgusting spirit. That's an abomination, because, you're exalting wickedness, man. And you're letting somebody else dwell in that. True love, a way that could be expressed is rebuke, because we know that love truly is adherence. And that's why, the body is so beautiful, because everybody is like-minded in the adherence to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. That body is all in the same, disposition to serve the Lord. So everybody's held to the same standard of, doing that in the same love, the same adherence. Driven by the love of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, we do things, as according unto the word. Being brotherly. Brothers have, testimonies of, a brother, waking up late as hell, flying all the way across, Cali, like an hour and a half drive, just give a sick brother that's sick some soup, and that's the love. That's that true love, man. And brothers have the testimonies of rebuking, reproving, and exhorting, one another, so that you help that man in his walk in the Lord, man. Because sin truly leads to death. Wickedness is the corruption of the spirit. All right, and the elders, beginning with the elder Pastor Tahar on down, constantly are in that spirit of rebuke, reproof, and exhortation, so that a man could hold on to his way. A man could do things righteously. There are spiritual leaders, and this world doesn't, know what true leadership is. They don't know what a true king is. They haven't seen a true king, and we're waiting for the Lord to make us, real kings. We're waiting for the Lord to, set us up on that stead, but we're going through that learning right now on how to conduct, on how to be. And how to be is ultimately, reprove, rebuke, and exhortation through the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, through the word. We and the world will tell you, if that person's doing their thing, it doesn't bother me. I follow the Lord is with me, and they can do whatever the hell they want to do. Fuck that. Absolutely not. Pursuing a Jake. These heathen, the word, these scriptures weren't made for them. These scriptures weren't, for them, as pursuing to Psalms 147 and 19. Right? These law, statutes, and commandments were made for the nation of Israel, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and ultimately the heathen are going to be in subjection under the law in the kingdom of Yahushai. But in this time that we're in, it's for you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and you have forsook it so badly. You have made you made mockery of the scriptures, man. You niggas figure out ways to make sin try to look cool, and that fake compassion. People be like, it's cool that they do that, but personally I would never do that. Like, what? the scriptures say, can two walk together lest they be agreed? You know, we understand that brothers might be into some things and other brothers might be into other things. But at the end of the day, it's in that spirit of love. You know, so like, not of love, but, you know, say one brother does, you know, he likes to do pickleball. The other brother likes to do boxing. You know, is that off? No. That brother just likes to do that for his physical exercise. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, but as according unto the law, statutes, commandments, and following the Lord, it's all within like mind. It's all within Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And that's the real important thing. That's the thing that the world doesn't understand. All right, we can like different things, you know. We can like, you know, one brother might like chicken, one brother might like salmon. You know, that's not wrong. You know, that brother just like what he like. But the world will have that, oh, he committed adultery and he can do whatever the hell he wants to do. But personally, I wouldn't do that. Fuck no, you should rebuke that. You know, and that's true love. That's true love, because if someone, you know, we're going to get that right now. This is I forget where that's at, Salakia. So another one you may have to bear with me for is open rebuke. Okay. It says open rebuke is better than secret love. You know? So, you know, open rebuke. It is better, you know, and Apostle Paul, you know, wrote of that as well. You know, we don't do this thing for the sake of being man pleasers. Okay? That open rebuke is, you know, is love. You know? That open rebuke, you know, will take a man to continue following the Lord. This is Galatians 1:10. And verse 9 it says, as we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you that ye may have received, let him be accursed. You know, if anyone's speaking, you know, anything other than the truth. And this world is in confusion. That's what Babylon means. Babylon means confusion. Okay? You know, and these people out here are, you know, so into how they feel, you know, and a lot of it is constructed by the woman, you know, because we understand that, you know, in the last days a woman should compass a man. You know, a woman's, you know, ideologies, you know, all over Babylon the Great. Oh, a man, you know, giving unto one wife. That shit came from Esau, you know, and Esau gave the woman the torch to spread all kinds of bullshit and rule over men here. All right, they're your bosses, they're your, you know, partners in life, and you can only, you know, you're devoted to one of them, and, you know, whatever says goes, and happy wife, happy life, all that bullshit. You know, that's off, man. When you let a woman lead, you ain't gonna see nothing but a whole bunch of, you know, BS. You ain't gonna see nothing, you know, move forward. You know, look at how a child is raised with their mother versus how a child is, you know, raised with their father. It has, you know, that's two totally different men you're gonna get, you know, based on the, you know, just who they were raised by, right? But claim, so like, but it says verse 10. It says, for do I now persuade men or the Lord, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet please men, I shall not be the servant of Hamashiach. And that's ultimately the job, you know, to be a servant unto the Lord. The whole duty of man is to fear the Most High and keep his commandments. It's not to make a motherfucker feel good. It's not to, you know, be in your feeling. And if you get rebuked too, it's off as hell. That's that fake ass sincerity to then be like mad that brother corrected you for your fault. That's a weird ass spirit to be in, and that's a real feminine spirit to be in. And brothers have gone through that to ad nauseum. That's something that's, you know, constantly reinforced because of, you know, how dangerous it could be for a man to be so proud and self-willed and ultimately, you know, also in feminine, that, you know, when he gets rebuked, he's over here, oh, what, you know, this man can't say nothing to me. You know, that's off. You know, true love is being able to you know, to take a man aside and be like, hey, you know, this is, you know, this and that and this and that is not cool. You know, you have to abstain from these things, or get away from these things, or stop this thing, or start this thing. You know, even if that thing might be difficult, because ultimately it's the Lord speaking through that man. As we know in Luke 1:70, the Lord speak through his prophets, his servants, the prophets. Also another one in Hosea, you know, really reinforcing that. You know, the Lord speaks through his prophets, you know, the men of the Lord. So you got brothers telling you, change your diet this, take heed to that. Don't be doing this. Don't commit adultery. Don't be out here in the world. Don't be out here, trying to make friends with everybody and shit in the world. People in the world be like, what? How? Just do what makes you happy, man. Fuck doing what makes you happy. Doing what makes you happy is going to lead to your death. And at this stage, man, it's either death or life. It says, therefore, let us wait. Select. I'm going to start at Wisdom of Solomon 2, and we're going to start at, Lord willing, we'll start at 5. It says, for our time is a very shadow that passeth away, and our end there is no returning, for it is fast sealed, so that no man cometh again. So these people in the world, they don't even really care about their lives, man. To a degree. They want to stay alive to do wickedness. Where rather the scriptures talk about how the men of the Lord love not their lives unto death. But while they do live, they live it unto the Lord, as we know in Romans 14:8. Whether we live unto the Lord. Whether we die unto the Lord. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. But on the contrary, you got people living these left-handed lives that they try to fill as much folly into it, knowing that at the end of it, they just pass on. And even these wacky-tacky Christians that be acting all holy and separate, and some of the biggest holes I ever met were so-called Christians, from that Roman Catholic Church. Talking about this and that, and I would never do this and that. They go back on their word. They don't. You can't expect these people in the word to actually mean what they say and say what they mean. These people aren't proven. They ain't sincere, man. They just through. It says, come on, therefore let us enjoy the good things that are present, and let us speedily use the creatures like as in youth. Let us fill ourselves with costly wine and ointments, and let no flower of the spring pass by us. It says, let me just jump down to verse. We'll just jump down to verse 12. It says, therefore let us lie in wait for the righteous, because he is not for our turn. And that's, ultimately, the position that the men of the Lord are in. Because you have the elders and apostles preaching that sound doctrine, and you got everybody else like, oh no, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that. Even these Christian churches, they'll preach against the word, but then they'll be listening to the ultimately the brothers, man. They'll be listening to the prophets, and they'll take those things, they'll take those scriptures, and they'll try to throw it into what they're trying to cook up. And that's how this is truly the truth, man. It's undoubtedly, there's so much wisdom, there's so much light within it, as the elder Kassad says, man. It says, because the Kassad of GMS says, because he is not for our turn, and he is clean contrary to our doings, he upbraideth us for our offending the law, and object to our infamy the transgressions of our education. So, they mad about, he's constantly, telling us what we're doing is wrong. It says, he professes to have the knowledge of the Lord, and he calleth himself the child of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. And that's true. I wholeheartedly believe, beginning with the elder apostles on down, these men have the spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and they're preaching that sound doctrine. This is the truth. This is 100% truth. Right? And the Lord has established that here in this world, man. And within that, a part of the truth is correcting your ways, because we spent so much time in the flesh that, certain things have to be addressed, and some of the times that when you have to get these things addressed, it has to come from another person to tell you it, because you can stand in the front of the mirror all you want, but sometimes, you're so hard-headed that you refuse to point certain things out. You got like a fat woman, they'll stand in front of the mirror and instead of looking at that, big ass, stomach hanging over their waist, they'll just look at their, big butt and breasts. It's like, hello, can we address the elephant in the room? Sometimes we could be like that in the spirit, refusing to addressing the elephant in the room, and, the elders, apostles, brothers will keep you in check to make sure that, you see that, whether it be through a virtual epistle that cuts you real deep, or whether that brother personally takes you aside and says, hey, this is that, and that is this. That's true love, because that man is looking out for you. That man is, showing you, better than you, and to a degree, these elders are so on point. They can see certain things about you and know certain things about you way better than you could have knew it. Because they've seen it before. They've had that experience, and they, are able to put that in, that experience into play through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. The Lord is administered healers here, man. That's a miracle. That truly is a miracle, how a man is able to, understand the word, understand the scriptures, have the experiences and collect that knowledge to physically change a man's life. Because I've personally had things in my life that completely changed by the wisdom of my elders, man. By the wisdom of our elders and apostles. All the time, so many different things. And on a more personal level. And of course, you have the coming into the truth and coming into the sound doctrine. That's the major boom. You completely reborn as a babe. And then I'm still being a babe. And, I think, oh, this and that and this. But brothers will pull out, particularities, like real small things that, hey, this got to be straightened out this way and this got to be polished that way. And that's true love, man. That's a real good feeling. That's an amazing feeling, because now hey, now I'm able to get better. Hey, now I'm able to get closer to the Lord. Now, this thing that's been vexing me that I didn't even know was vexing me is done. It's gone. It's through. Good things come out of that. Good things come out of, what the Lord has established. But it comes difficultly, and within difficulty as well. Sometimes you get blessings, you have to take that ass whooping. But hey, it says, he professes to have the knowledge of the Lord and called himself the child of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. He was made to reprove our thoughts. He was grievous unto us even to behold, for his life is not like other men's. His ways are of another fashion. And that's ultimately what the men of the Lord here are on this day. But hey, I want to lastly give all honor, praises, and infinite glory to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai Bashem Kakodash. Shalom.